Good morning, everyone, distinguished guests. On behalf of the experts in international trade at the Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal, we welcome you to our webinar of the Desjardins International Meeting Series. And today's topic is an overview of the international development market with a spotlight on the Millennium Challenge Corporation. My name is Dina Mansour, and I am an advisor for international market development at the Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal, and I am pleased to host this webinar with you today. Our speakers are Leah Johnston, Trade Commissioner at the Office of Liaison with the International Finance Institution at the Embassy of Canada in Washington, D.C., as well as Julio Sarria, Procurement Director of Program Procurement Policy at the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I would like to use this time to thank our partners, starting with Desjardins, our principal sponsor, as well as our collaborators, Export Development Canada and La Presse, who made this webinar possible, and last but not least, Economic Development Agency of Canada for the regions of Quebec for its ongoing support of World Trade Center Montreal's activities. So there is currently an ongoing poll that we would please ask you to fill, as it helps us keep track of our internal KPIs. If you have any questions to our panelists, we invite you to write them in a designated Q&A box located on the bottom center of your screen, and we will address them towards the end of the webinar. You may ask your question in the official language of your choosing, and I will be happy to translate for you if needed. Alors, veuillez prendre note que ce webinaire est principalement en anglais. Toutefois, si vous avez des questions en français, vous pouvez les poser et il nous fera plaisir de les traduire en temps réel. Vous allez aussi avoir les diapositives qui vont être traduites en français que vous allez recevoir demain également. You will also receive a short survey that will pop up in your browser at the end that we will invite you to answer to gather your opinion for future events. I will also send you a follow-up email tomorrow, which will include the presentation used today in both languages, in French and in English. Also, if you would like to watch this webinar again, we will make the recording available on the Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal website, as well as our YouTube page. So let me start by introducing our first speaker today, Leah Johnston. She is a trade commissioner covering the international financial institutions based at the Embassy of Canada in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the team, Leah was a procurement officer for aid-funded business with the Department for International Trade at the British Embassy in Washington. In this role, she helped UK companies navigate and find success with the World Bank Group, the Inter-American Development Bank, USAID, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. So, Leah, I now invite you to have the floor.
Thank you, Dina, for the introduction and for hosting and organizing this event today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Johnston. I'm a trade commissioner in the Office of Liaison with the International Financial Institutions. We call ourselves OLIFIs for short. Next slide. I am based at the Embassy of Canada in Washington, D.C., and I'll be joined by Julio Sarria, who is a procurement director with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, also based in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So the agenda for today's event, I'll start off by talking about the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service and specifically the OLIFI role and how we can support Canadian companies. Work with international financial institutions and aid agencies. I will then hand over to Julio. He's going to be talking about the Millennium Challenge Corporation, how it operates, what are its objectives and goals, and how to access business opportunities. We'll end with a question and answer session. And to reiterate what Dina already said, please use the Q&A function for any questions that you have while the presentation is going on. And then we will conclude the webinar at 11 a.m. Next slide. So what is the role of an OLIFI Trade Commissioner? We're a little different from other trade commissioners in the Trade Commissioner Service. We cover institutions rather than sectors. The Trade Commissioner Service, our role is to support Canadian companies as they expand and export across the globe. We're in over 100 markets. And our role is to really help Canadian companies find success overseas. The OLIFI Trade Commissioners, our roles are really to demystify and explain how these institutions work, And we can also help assess your market potential for the IFIs and international development market. A big part of our job is identifying qualified key contacts within these institutions and helping you navigate them. A lot of them are large institutions with hundreds of staff, and they have their headquarters in Washington as well as their offices overseas. So we can help make sure that you're connecting with the right people. We can also help resolve problems that may occur during the procurement process and advise you on the different procurement policies of each institutions and what your rights are as a bidder or as a contractor. We coordinate Canadian participation in key events such as sector-specific trade missions, business opportunity fairs. Recently, we've been doing an IFI series with the Metropolitan Montreal Chamber of Commerce. We've covered World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the Asian Development Bank. And obviously today we're talking about the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And we also disseminate business opportunities when we know that there is Canadian interest in a certain country, or there's Canadian expertise in a certain sector, or if we know it's a unique opportunity, maybe a blanket purchase agreement or some type of opportunity that only comes up every 5 years. Or something like that. It really depends. We don't follow every single project of the institutions that we cover just due to volume. But if there is a project of interest and you're looking for more information, or you want to make sure that you have all the correct information, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to do research on our end as well. Those are kind of the general ways that we support Canadian companies as they work with these institutions, but it really depends on what your goals are, what your experience is, and what you're looking for, information, access to people, etc. We work with small to medium enterprises as well as large companies across all the sectors that these institutions work in, such as transport, energy, water, to education, healthcare, agriculture, governance, and almost everything in between. So I am not a sector expert. My role is to really help you navigate these institutions and help you better understand how they work, and hopefully find success with some of the business opportunities that they finance. Next slide. So I think I mentioned that all the OLIFI trade commissioners were co-located with the major IFIs. So I'm in Washington, joined by my colleagues Julie Mann and Fahim Noor Ali, who's a climate finance trade commissioner. We cover the World Bank Group, the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the U.S. agencies for international development, which is USAID, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, as well as the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, also known as DFC. I also cover the New York agencies of the UN. My colleague Tammy Brathwaite is based in Bridgetown, covering the Caribbean Development Bank. Ulaj Kamara is based in Abidjan, covering the African Development Bank. Lily Zhu is based in Beijing, covering the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And Grimmy Guarco is based in Manila, covering the Asian Development Bank. Next slide. This is all of our contact information. So please feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues directly. I'm also happy to make an introduction to my colleagues as well, if you're interested in working with any of the institutions that they cover. And this presentation will be shared following the conclusion of this webinar, so don't feel like you need to write all this down now. Next slide. So why should you bid on Millennium Challenge Corporation projects? Most companies view MCC projects as a less risky way to enter developing markets. The same goes for IFI projects. MCC projects follow similar procurement policies to the IFIs, but there's a few differences. They provide transparency and integrity in the procurement process. Julio is going to go into more details on the procurement process and some key differences with some IFIs that the MCC has in their projects, so I won't go into it anymore. MCC funds are untied and they're open to international competition, meaning Canadian companies are eligible to bid on these projects. Julio will talk a little bit about where some Canadian success in the past, how we've performed compared to other countries in MCC projects, and he's going to be talking about some upcoming MCC projects as well, in regions that we know that there is Canadian interest and Canadian expertise, specifically in West and East Africa. So with that, I would like to hand over to Julio. But before I do, I would like to introduce Julio. So Julio is the Procurement Director of Program Procurement Policy at the Millennium Challenge Corporation in Washington, D.C. He oversees the development and implementation of program-related procurement policy and procedures and monitors the execution of program procurements during compact and threshold program implementation. He has provided procurement oversight for Mongolia, Nepal, Timor-Leste, Kosovo, Malawi, Mozambique, Honduras, El Salvador, Jordan, the Philippines, Liberia, Indonesia, Moldova, and Nicaragua. He has over 20 years of public procurement and project management experience and is MCC's first Millennium Challenge account hire. Prior to joining MCC, he was the procurement director for the Millennium Challenge account in Nicaragua, where he was responsible for managing all procurement activity to implement the compact in accordance to MCC procurement guidelines. Prior to joining Millennium Challenge account in Nicaragua, he held positions in development work programs financed by the World Bank Group, the United Nations, the European Union, private sector, among others. He joined MCC as a procurement director in 2010. He is a graduate of Florida International University, where he majored in business administration, and he went on to earn a master's degree in education at Framingham State University. He is also a fluent Spanish speaker. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Julio. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. And now over to you.
Great, thank you, Leah. Thank you for such a detailed introduction. I appreciate it. And I am so thrilled to be here with you guys today and be able to share some information that hopefully you'll find useful in upcoming opportunities to do business with MCC. As Leah said, my name is Julio Sarria. I'm a procurement director with MCC. And I'm going to be talking to you guys basically a little bit about the overall of MCC, and then I'm going to go into specifics of procurement. So next slide, please. All right, so as MCCs, for those that don't know who we are, well, we're a completely U.S. government foreign assistance agency with the main goal of ending global poverty. We were created back in 2004 with bipartisan support as a different approach to doing foreign assistance. And here we are, you know, so many years later, and we still enjoy that bipartisan support. So next slide, please. Okay, so our mission is, as I mentioned, is reducing poverty through economic growth. That's really why we're here. We do that through investments that promote economic growth, as I said, help people lift themselves out of poverty, create more stable, secure countries and regions, open the door for companies such as yourselves to work in new markets with fewer upfront risks. And then, of course, we have also American interests at mind. This is really our mission, and I'll talk a little bit more about the structure of MCC and on the next slide. Okay, so what makes MCC unique is that we work sort of like resembling a corporation, a private firm. So every time we're going to make a grant or what we call compact, we consider a minimum economic rate of return before we put money into that investment. So we're not a humanitarian aid agency, and we view all of our compacts or grants as investments. We are a small agency with a big impact, and when I say small agencies, because for many years we were capped at 300 employees. So about 200 of them being here at the headquarters, and then the other 100 being out in the field in the countries that we work in. However, with those 300 people, we are able to manage over $14 billion since we were first created. All of our programs, when it comes to partner countries, are 5-year programs. There's no exception. So when I tell you that at the end of the 5 years, the program is over, it is really over. Regardless of whether we got to meet the goal, which we hope we do, and we do for the most part, but we cannot stretch the 5-year timeline. We are focused on results, and I'll go a little bit more into detail about that later. We have a country-led solutions implementation by the country. that is implementing the program, and then I'll explain that a little bit later. So we basically provide the grant money, we provide the funding, we provide the oversight, we provide our expertise, we provide some of the guidelines that they must use. However, the country where we're working in is the one that sets up their own office and runs their own program. So that's what the ownership is about. MCC only works with small group of countries that practice good governance, economic growth, and investment in people, investing in people. I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide. Countries are selected based on indicators. These indicators are provided by the World Bank, and there's certain criteria that the countries to become eligible must meet, and that is passing a minimum of the 50% of the total of the 20 indicators, and then there's 3 indicators that they must pass. Failing of any of those 3 indicators makes the country ineligible, and I'll go a little bit more into the detail in the next slide. We only work with low income and low middle income countries. And then, as I mentioned before, MCC structured like a corporation. That means that we have a board of directors. We means that we have a CEO, an acting CEO right now, and that we work with senior management that includes vice presidents and managing directors. Next slide, please. All right, so let's see, can you guys hear me okay?
Actually, could you maybe, yes, bring your microphone a little bit closer? We do hear you, but your voice is a little bit far.
Okay, how about now?
It's excellent now.
Okay, excellent. I just had to switch the headphones back. All right, so let's see. Our board of directors uses data-driven to make their decisions, to identify which ones are the best governed poor countries where MCC can reduce poverty through economic growth and have a good impact in that. Our board members, as you can see, I'm not going to read all of them to you, but these are our board members. As you can see, you know, there's half of them are going to be public sector and half of them are going to be private sector. These are the 3 indicators that you see on the right that I was telling you that they must pass. Aside from the 50% of the other indicators, these are the 3 that absolutely must be passed. So then the country becomes eligible for our funding. Okay, next slide. Now, as Leah said earlier, this recording will be shared and you guys will be able to access this information. So don't worry about looking at every single detail in this sheet. The bottom line, or what we want to portray with this sheet, is to get you guys to understand that we basically work throughout, you know, in different parts of the world. As long as the countries that we're working with meet the indicators that I was talking to you guys a little bit about, then these are the different countries where we've had some sort of presence by either having a small threshold program, which is a smaller program compared to the compacts, and then the large grants, which we call compacts. So that's just a slide to provide you a little bit of information of where we work. Next slide, please. Okay, this is where we're going to start going into the specifics of procurement. So I'm going to leave a little bit of the generalities of MCC out, and we're going to go in specifically into procurement. Before I start, I want to make sure that we understand that you guys understand the following assumption, which is that there's 2 types of procurement. The procurement that we do with headquarters, so that means here at the MCC, you know, Washington office, which is about $7 million a year. Those are administered by MCC. That means that we do our own procurement internally. We award those contracts in, you know, ourselves, and therefore we are, as the U.S. government, the employer of those particular contracts. Now, that's not where most of our money is spent. And then again, because, you know, the money that we are spending is towards the goal of reducing poverty and is used in or spent in our partner countries, but we do have some internal procurements that are running the office for day-to-day operations, due diligence, and sometimes we need a hand because we're such a small agency that we go out and try to get some additional personnel to help us with the country oversight. The main difference between what I'm going to be basing the rest of my presentation from this is that these procurements are governed by the FAR. So everything that we do internally is governed by the FAR, which does have some local or national preference in them, but those are not the procurements that I'm going to be talking to you about. So those that are interested in internal MCC procurements, you'll be able to find those in our website, and I'll talk to you guys about where to find that later. But my presentation is going to be based on, for the most part, the procurements that we do in our partner countries. As you can see on the right hand of that column, these are equivalent to about $500 million per year. They are administered by our partner countries, which we call MCAs, Millennium Challenge Account. So when you hear me say MCA, that means that that's the office that was set up for the sole purpose of running these programs on the ground. Now, we provide the oversight, but then again, the implementation is led by the MCA. And those are governed by the MCC Program Procurement Guidelines, PPGs. You'll hear that abbreviation being used a lot in the presentation, and it's basically our own procurement guidelines that must be used by our partner countries throughout the world. So it's a harmonized version of procurement guidelines that are provided to all the MCAs, and all of the MCAs must follow the same one. Now, these guidelines are based out of originally from the World Bank, with some other minor differences that we'll be covering later on. And one of them is that they do not have any preference embedded in there. So they're not tied either to US companies, but they're also not tied to any other particular nationality. So these are open procurements in its full meaning. So that's one of the major differences between the PPGs and perhaps other donors. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so what are some of the areas that we're working in, and what are we achieving? Like I said, $14 billion or just about have been implemented since 2004, and these are some of the sectors that we've been working in. Now, these are not the only sectors we work in. These are the ones that the bulk of the work has gone into. But then as we entered into new partnerships with new countries, and we enter into new compacts, there might be, a different area or a different sector that pops up that is not on this list. One of the first things that we do when we're considering the investment in our partner countries is that we carry out a constraint analysis to determine what is it that is keeping this country from reaching its financial independence, or reducing, improving their economic growth and reducing poverty. What is keeping the country from doing that? And based on what we see on those, in that constraint analysis, then that's where we start to develop, the possibilities for investment. So in a particular country, it might have to do with agriculture, but another one might have to do with transportation, and in other countries, it might be something that is not even on this list. So then again, we're adding different sectors, as we implement in new countries. With different needs. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a little bit of, it's a little small maybe for you guys, but as you can see, that's a lot of the information that I just provided you, but more with percentages. Oddly enough, the transport, road and water and air used to be most of our portfolio, and then energy kicked in, and that has been increasing somewhat throughout the years. The program and monitoring administration, we like to keep it at 10% or less. And then everything else, then of course, there's a couple of other sectors in there that you're able to see. So this is kind of just a pie chart of what that looks like in percentage. The next slide, please. Now, this one is even more populated, so please don't try to get all the details out of it. But I do want to point out basically that, as you can see from here, the amount of contracts being awarded are very different from country to country. These are the ones that are mostly winning those contracts with our partner countries, and their percentages. In there, I know Canada is in there with 85 million, which is really $88 million, is the last figure that I got. Now, you're going to see some countries, for example, I'm just going up from the very top just because it's there. Ecuador. I'm not familiar with what contract they won, but of course, Ecuador has not been a recipient of our grant. So this is just a country that came in and provided service. It says in one of our partnering countries, just like Turkey. And then you have Georgia, which is a country that we had a partnership with. And of course, then that means that a lot of those procurements were implemented by local contractors from Georgia. So you're going to see a combination of local contractors, Georgia, Burkina Faso, Tunisia, Ghana, Indonesia, Benin. Those are all countries where we have programs, but then you have other countries like Canada, Botswana, Austria, Italy, Belgium, India, Germany, China that we do not have compacts with, and yet they have won some of these contracts. So then again, this is just to show you how diverse it is to have contracts with MCC partner countries. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, now, just for a little bit of your information, these are compacts that are either recently signed, have been recently signed, or they are under development. So if you're looking for new opportunities, these are the ones that are just starting or will start very, very soon. So this is where the bulk of our procurement opportunities are going to be in. I'll talk about where to find the opportunities and how in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that this is where most of the money is going to be going into. Most of the opportunities are going to be going into these countries because they're recently signed or they're currently under development. Next slide, please. These threshold programs are smaller in value because then again, threshold programs, compact programs are different. Now, just to give a brief explanation, a threshold program is basically to a country that perhaps is not fully eligible for a compact. So we're going to make a smaller investment to get that country to graduate to a compact level so they can receive the larger grant. So that's typically what a threshold program is. It's a mini compact. And these are the countries where we're working with new threshold programs that hopefully will then turn into larger programs. The compacts in Liberia and El Salvador are closing or have closed now in 2021. So there's really no procurement opportunities in there. So I just wanted to flag that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we're going to talk a little bit about where to find the opportunities. This is basically our own MCC website, and in there you're going to see basically, you know, the different type of opportunities that we have. Either you want to do it by compact procurements, as I was saying before. You want to look at threshold procurements, which are smaller programs. You want to look at consultant opportunity. You want to look at grants. You're looking for business opportunities, jobs that, you know, that maybe you want to apply. These are, everything is a one-stop shop. So you're going to find the own MCC procurements, and you're going to find also the MCA opportunities. And then you can divide them and filter them by country, perhaps by sector, and or the type of opportunity you're seeking. So there you go. The doing business with, you know, MCC are in basically those three pockets: compact procurements, threshold procurements, and business opportunities. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is a little bit of a, you know, then again, a lot of information in here, but I think it's a good slide, and I choose to use it so then you guys get a better picture of how MCC works. So look at the very top where you see MCC, you know, we signed some sort of agreement, whether it be a threshold or a compact with the host country. Once we do that, the host country creates an accountable entity, which is the entity that's going to run the program. At the same time, on the left-hand side, you see MCC opens a small office in country that is also going to provide the oversight to the MCA. Now, the MCA will hire two types of agents. One of them is the fiscal agent that's going to manage their accounting, basically. And then the other one is going to be a procurement agent who's going to carry out all of their procurements on their behalf. Why do we do that? For many reasons. One of them being that we want the MCAs to focus on results. Remember that we talked a little bit about focus on results. We want them to reduce poverty. We want them to implement the programs. We want them to do it in for 5 years and be successful. So we don't want to burden them with the administrative work. So we take out the procurement work, we take out the fiscal work that is done independently by a private company who's procured openly and awarded from an open competition, and then they run the procurements and their accounting. Now, When it comes to the fiscal agent, which is the one doing their accounting, they're going to open a small bank account in country, which is the bank account that they're going to be paying their salaries, for example. So day-to-day operations, that's where the money goes into a small bank account for those day-to-day operations. The rest of the money, which is the large payments for all of the work that MCA awards, stays with US Treasury, and it's paid directly from US Treasury. That money never leaves or goes through their local government. The payments are made straight from Treasury to the awarded contractors, even though these contractors are, as you can see from this graph, are not MCC contractors. The MCA entity is the one that hires their project managers, who then, through a technical evaluation panel, select their contractors or consultants, and then the payment is made directly by, as I was saying, Treasury. So as you can see, these are not, if you bid on these contracts, these are contracts that are awarded by the MCA. You become the MCA's consultant. However, the only thing that remains consistent with MCC in the sense of the relationship with MCC is that we'll be making the payment straight to you from Treasury. So that's something that provides a little bit of a risk-free environment, I would say, to do business. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, please. All right, now where do we publish our different opportunities? You have the general procurement notice, which is usually published I would say every quarter, not really 6 months nowadays. And it's a 1 year publication, or one year, an annual forecast, where you're going to have basically what the MCA is going to be buying for the next year. That is a heads up to all the companies that this is what we're going to be buying for the next year. Now you have the specific procurement notices, which is the specific notice for the particular procurement, not the one that, like I was saying, annual, that has the listing of all 50 procurements. No, this is the SPN where they're talking about the particular procurement and the particular bidding document that you can download and take a look in case you're interested in bidding. The procurement plan is usually published with the GPN, or is based from the procurement plan. And then MCC's website is going to capture that same information and also put it in our business forecast, which is going to be basically the 1 year looking forwards of what procurements are coming up in what country. So also you can go to the MCA's website and find the MCA specific information. So if you're interested, let's say in Indonesia, you're going to find on the MCA website just the Indonesia procurements. But if you go to the MCC website, you're going to find Indonesia and every other country with all of their opportunities per country. So then again, the MCC website is more of a one-stop shop. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, now these procurement opportunities, then again, they're advertised, as I said, on the MCA MCC website. They're also done in the local newspapers. So that's meant so then also local, bidders are aware of these opportunities, because then the other vehicles that we use for publication are international. So the DG Market, UN Development Business, and FedBiz Ops. So in case it's a smaller procurement and we were dealing with the local market, then they also get to at least know that this opportunity, however, they get no preference, as I said. Just the fact that we're working in a country does not create any set-asides for any particular country. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, this one I think we can go fairly quickly because I want to leave some time, of course, for questions. As I said, if you're interested in how these procurements are done, the PPG is available on our website. Also, our standard bidding documents are on our website. The reason why we do these standard bidding documents is so that everybody has a harmonized way of doing business. So if you're bidding in one country and then you decide to bid in another, you're going to be using the same standard bidding document. So as you bid and become familiar with our documents, you're going to start to see that it's basically, a harmonized procedure or harmonized process of how to conduct procurement. So it becomes a lot easier and more manageable. We already talked about the procurement agents. And then we already also talked about the oversight that we provide, not only here through the headquarters in Washington, but also the office that we open in the particular country, where we also staff it up with MCC personnel to provide direct oversight on the day-to-day. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some of these reasons I think we already covered throughout the presentation. Like I said, you have 5 years. That means that there's a lot of pressure to get the work done, but that means that once you get it done, you get paid on time. Transparent international competition. Like I said, we're following the PPG. They contain a bid challenge system, which is a way or an opportunity or a system that provides the opportunity for any bidder that feels that there has been a breach in the PPG or in the procurement process, that you can challenge that, you can protest that, and that's free basically. The first level is free. So that is something that you need to be aware of in case that you perceive that something wasn't done according to the PPG, then you can also challenge that. It's open competition, like I said, no nationality preference. We do place a strong emphasis on past performance, either being past performance in general, meaning the experience that you bring to the table and references you bring to the table, or if you have worked before with an MCA, which is not a requirement, we're also going to be looking at that past performance if there is any. But if you don't have it, then again, it's not evaluated nor required. What we're looking here is for past performance and experience, regardless of where it's coming from. Let's see. Now, another thing that is interesting to you guys is that anything above $1 million is required to be evaluated by an external industry expert, not controlled by the government, not by the MCA, not by their own staff. They need to have external panelists that we often review their CVs for. So any of those large procurements, the multi-million-dollar procurements, the people that select the actual awards are going to be independent experts. So they're hired openly. Then again, they go out to the market, they get different CVs, they evaluate their skills, they evaluate their experience, and then the awards are going to be done by industry experts and not selected by by a partner country's government or government officials. All right, so we can go to the next slide. We talked about the procurement agent already. We talked about Treasury being, the ones that pays you directly. We do pay a lot of, attention to international and labor standards. We do have policies in place in our standard bidding documents. And this I mentioned because this is something that is evaluated. This is not something recent. This is not something that we put in there as just a standard clause just to put in there. We actually evaluate that. So please pay attention to the requirements that you need to present or you need to demonstrate having experience with when it deals with environment and labor standards. Let's see, we already talked about the fair contract management and practices supervised by MCC. And then we have a strong focus on impact analysis, meaning that we have an M&E, monitoring evaluation shop, that basically looks at where we started, where we want to be, and then we take measurements of that and measure the impact. Not only that we are leaving, of how much of a footprint we're leaving, but also one that is tied to sustainability. Because then again, we're looking at these as investments. So we're not going to put money into something that that the partner country is not able to maintain after we leave. So then we're constantly evaluating that. All right, we can go to the next slide, please. Some tips for you guys. It's basically try to, and this is just encouraging you, but it's not a requirement, is to try to find joint ventures. Other partners that you can partner with, either, to enhance or enrich your experience, or basically because you're looking for someone who has worked in the particular country. It's not a requirement. You'll never see it as a requirement. We don't allow that requirement, but we encourage it. So if you're a company that has never worked in one particular country where we have a compact, then it might be good for you to partner with somebody who has either worked in that country or who works in that country. That could be international or local firm. But that usually helps to enhance your experience and help you transition into this new venture. Now, how you find that is not something that we provide. We don't try to marry any companies, but what we do is that we will publish, and the MCAs will also publish the awards. So you'll be able to find out who's winning contracts, who has bid, who has won contracts, and for what amount and for what type of work. So then from that list, you can kind of, begin to contact other companies that have worked in the particular field that you're looking for, in the particular country you're looking for. So that's one way you find those opportunities. Another one is that the MCAs will have pre-conferences for their procurements. So basically now they're doing it virtually, and now it's become more of a requirement to do them virtually so everybody can join. So you can definitely see who's participating, who's interested, and then inquire from there. The other thing that I would tell you is to remember we talked about the standard bidding documents. People make the mistake thinking they're just like the World Banks and they will miss some requirements. So please don't make that assumption. The reason why we spin off the World Bank and we have our own procurement guidelines and our own documents is because we have to embed US law in it. So then some of the requirements, the eligibility checks will be different. The certifications that you fill will be different. So please don't assume that it's the same as the bank, even though we appreciate the bank's support in allowing us to use their references at the very beginning. Let's see, use, of course, the forms. We have a lot of bidders that decide to use their own forms, and that creates a mess. And then if you have any questions, then take a look at our guidelines, our PPG, that are also in our website. The fixed price contracts is basically the way that we do business for the most part with our partner countries is through fixed price contracts. However, we allow basically every other type of contract that you can think of. So it's not that they're not allowed, it's just that the preferred way of doing contracts is through a fixed price contract. So I just wanted to put that out there. All right, next slide, please. Zero tolerance to fraud and corruption. I'm pretty sure that you've heard this before, but we do, monitor, we do train the MCAs on how to report fraud and corruption. We work very closely with the OIG. We have ways to report fraud and corruption or provide allegations. It's anonymous if needs to be. And we do act on it with the support of the OIG. We do have cases where we have actually taken action and we have canceled contracts, or firms have become debarred, or we've asked the country to terminate a contract and pay us back because of some sort of fraud. It doesn't happen all the time, but I want you to know that it's because we have straight and very strict fraud and corruption oversight. Let's see, request of information and clarification. I think this is pretty straightforward, but what I would say is don't cheat yourself by not, asking any questions you may have or concerns that you may have. In fact, I would recommend that you go into our website, identify the MCAs and the opportunities you'll be interested in, and go ahead and contact them. Go ahead and write their procurement agent and say, I'm interested. So then they can put you in some sort of roster and then get back to you when that procurement opportunity is launched and let you know, so then you can participate. But there's nothing wrong with you guys reaching out directly to the MCA or directly to the procurement agent, establishing that rapport and showing basically what your services are. Then again, I talked about the bid challenge system. That's one way that you can, have the right to review what this decision that MCA is making in regards to the award. And also you are entitled to a debriefing, which is not at the level of a formal protest, but it's at the level of, can you please explain to me, how I can do better? They're not there to tell you how the other companies did better. They're not going to disclose information about the other companies, but they will talk to you about your own bid and how you could have done better and what are some of the strengths and weaknesses they found in your bid. So that's called a debriefing. Next slide, please. And that's it. I'm looking at time. It's 10:45, so I rushed it a little bit, but we are at 16 minutes for Q&A. So thank you so much. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarria, and for Leah as well. So we are now at the Q&A period. We invite everyone to write down your questions. We already received a couple of questions from attendees, so we will start. So the first question from Vincent Dehan. What are the advantages for MCC of working with Canadian firms rather than US firms? And are there complementary links or shared strategies between MCC and Global Affairs Canada? So maybe, Leah, if you'd like to start with the second part, if there are complementary links or shared strategies between MCC and Global Affairs Canada, and then Julio, if you want, you can go ahead for the rest of the question.
Sure, thank you, Dina. I definitely think there's links between MCC International Development Objectives and Global Affairs Canada. I mean, I would say though, just to keep in mind, I am on the trade side of GAC, so I am not a development professional, but I think they both have priorities around reducing poverty through economic growth, supporting women-owned enterprises and you know, women's economic empowerment. I will say though, on the kind of first part of the question, as I mentioned earlier, MCC is untied, meaning it is open to Canadian firms. US firms are also obviously eligible. Canada, I think, has a lot of expertise in the consulting and professional services sectors, particularly in renewable energy, environment, transport, water sectors. That's where we see a lot of sort of the infrastructure sectors, as well as in agriculture and education sectors. Canadian companies also have the bilingual capacity. And as you saw from Julio's presentation, there's a number of threshold and compacts in West Africa, as well as in East Africa. So there's the language component. The MCC, or the companies that we work with that have worked with MCC, really like the MCC approach. The fact that it is time bound. The 5-year timeline is strict, meaning these projects are not going to go on for longer than that, which can sometimes happen on other on IFI projects. Being paid by the US Treasury is something that they also really appreciate. And I would also say MCC is very open with their information. Julio pointed out all the different links on their website where you can find it. The business forecast is a great tool. And I think it's updated quarterly. And I think it was updated at maybe it was the beginning of this month or last month. So those are great tools that companies can use. Their website's very easy to navigate. And you can see exactly what's being procured. It'll give you the names of the contact people who are in charge of them. It'll tell you at what quarter it's being procured. So they have a lot of information. So I would say definitely spend some time getting to know their website and understanding all those resources that are available to you.
Thank you. And Julio, did you have something else to add?
Not a whole lot, Leah. That was very comprehensive, and thank you. I would just say that MCC is recently now venturing into partnerships. So we are currently developing a partnership program that will work similarly to procurement, in the sense that sometimes these partnerships will be competed, and some other times there will be straight out partnerships with either agencies that already have some sort of investment in the country, where we can basically, you know, provide additional funding and have a greater, you know, impact. We've already done that, for example, in Liberia, a country that I've worked in with, where we came in and worked with other donors like the World Bank, KCGF. It was another one that was present in there. And we basically just we piggy ride off a project that they had already started many years ago in a hydro plant. So we're starting to do that a little bit more. So that might be another way of providing opportunities to you. And you'll find those on our website. So I just wanted to add that. Now, in regards to specific examples, this information is going to resonate more than with you guys that are in the field. But some of the Canadian firms that have won contracts, large contracts, is AECOM. They did so in Benin and Cote d'Ivoire. Manitoba Hydro, they did that in Benin. They won a contract in Benin. You have Coldwater did also won contracts in Zambia and Niger. And then you have the Consortium of International Development of Education, CIDE, in Morocco. So then again, I'm not sure specifically what sectors these are, but these are just some of the companies that account for the $88 million that have been awarded to Canadian firms. Thanks.
Thanks. So our next question is just to clarify something. It's a question from David Lee, who's asking, for MCA opportunities, will local taxes need to be included in the bid price?
So for the most part, if it is, the one thing is that some MCAs choose to do that, so then they know how much of tax will be exempt. So I would say that the most important part about that question or that concern is to know that no funding of MCC goes into paying taxes. So then we basically partner with the country and say, you will not tax any of our investments. And that triggers down to the equipment that you will purchase as consultants, bring into the country as consultants. That will not be taxed. You will not be taxed at all. Now you have local tax obligations in your own, in Canada, but not in the co-partnering country. If they do ask for that information, is so then they can compare apples to apples. But at the bottom line is that no, the taxes will become irrelevant to the point that we don't fund any taxes. So then all of our investments will be exempt from local taxes.
Thank you. Okay. Our next question is also an explanation. Someone is asking if you could please explain again, what did you mean by an external verification companies for project about above $1 million to do what exactly?
Okay, so no problem. This is I'm glad that you guys are asking this. So there's a lot of concern, and I'm gonna be just in general. When we were created about other donors experiencing that when they would make an investment or the grant, that the companies were being selected by, by the government directly. Sometimes it could be someone that is not skilled in the particular field, or they had particular personal interest, or any other, how do I say, intentions behind it. So not only to mitigate that possibility, but also, provide more credibility to the process, then we're basically saying, no, we're going to evaluate, proposals using external members who are independent to the, local government, who are not, local participants. These are folks that have many years in experience in the sector, that come from reputable international efforts. We'll look at the CVs and ensure that the people that are being used to evaluate these proposals are not people that have influence or the power to influence the local MCA. Let me just give you not a particular example, but things that I have seen in the field is that you have someone at the ministry level, perhaps the minister, to say, I want to have say in the award of this contract, and then they'll sit in the evaluation. And it's going to be hard to say no to a minister, right? When the minister is saying, this is what I want. If you work for that particular ministry. So what we've done is we've removed that. We basically said, this is independent. And the only thing that you'll get out of this evaluation is a recommendation that you either accept or you reject. The local MCA will not have a say of, no, I don't like this one, let's go with the second. It doesn't go like that. The recommendation is based on the evaluation criteria, and then either you accept the evaluation, recommendation, or you don't. Now, the one thing is that we won't allow is for the country to say, no, we don't accept it and we want it redone. We were going to say, no, we want to know why you want it redone, because if it's just to change the scoring and have somebody else win, we're not going to allow it. So the use of these external members is to mitigate any fraud, to be honest with you, and to ensure that the people that are evaluating these proposals are people that are not only skilled and experienced in the field, but they're all also independent. They can act unbiasedly and without any conflict of interest of their own.
Thank you. So I see we're receiving a lot of questions and the time is going by. So maybe we'll take 2 or 3 more questions. And if you had somebody has had an answer that wasn't answered, please feel free to reach out to us and we can communicate with you later on. We'll take one quick question from Caroline Marcel. She is wondering, can NGO also bid on projects, or do you only work with the private sector?
Oh, no, not at all. So NGOs can. That is what we are really strict is government-owned entities. We don't allow any type of government-owned entity to not even win, not even bid. They're immediately disqualified, government-owned entities, in the supply of goods and works. It won't apply to consultancy. So so if you are just basically an NGO, you have no issues. If you are a GOE or a government-owned entity, then yes, you need to make sure that you're not bidding on anything related to works or goods, because then government-owned entities are not allowed to participate in those procurements or those bids. The reason why we do it is partly because we want to keep a leveraged playing field. Usually governments receive some sort of subsidy that makes it unfair when you're evaluating, for example, price as part of the evaluation criteria. So we've removed that, and that's another way that we're unique. Other donors allow for that. We just simply don't.
Thanks. Another question is, someone says, notice that there are MC projects designed for several countries together. For example, all West African countries for energy, for example. Is this a continued or a new trend?
Absolutely. This is one of the priorities that MCC continues to venture in. We call them regional compacts, where we find several different countries that we can work together and do, let's say, one type of program, but with multiple beneficiary countries. We are still in the process of trying to do the first one. There has been challenges in this venture, but it's definitely not something that we removed off the table. It's actually one of our management's priorities. So absolutely, please expect that at some point we will get there. We're still working on it, and thank you for the interest in the question.
Thanks. Someone is also asking, what does the bidder do if the answers provided by the MC are not timely or confusing or incomplete? And there was another similar question regarding, sorry, I can't find it anymore. Let's just go with, oh, okay. So I think it's the same person added also, if we get unclear answers from the MCs, how taxes will be handled.
Okay, so then there's several vehicles that you can use for that. You can definitely reach out directly to their, because I mean, you don't have to do it in this order, but the way that I recommend is that, kind of keeping, the sequence of things. I would say to reach out to the MCA and say, no, this is not clear. If they don't respond, go to their PA directly, their procurement agent. And if that's not responsive, you can reach out directly to MCC as you see fit. You can go directly to us if your experience has been so bad that they don't respond regardless of the PA or regardless of the MCA, then come straight to us. Now, if for example, one of the things that is, I don't know if this is a word, challengeable in our bid challenge system is the specs themselves. If the MCA goes out with a bidding document that it's either unclear or it's specifically directed to a particular company or a brand, that is challengeable. So then you can go and say, I challenge that. This is being, completely cited to a particular company, and I can demonstrate it by showing you the following technical specifications. Now, when it's the opposite, when they're very general, that's a little bit more difficult because they're not trying to maybe nail it to a particular company. It's just that they're being ambiguous enough that it's probably going to lead to some sort of bad procurement, a pretty poor selection, or very low quality kind of thing. So in there, it's not so much a complaint, but what you would be advised to do would be to maybe reach out to the MCA and say, you know what, I'm the market. What you're going out there for is too ambiguous. May I recommend this? The MCAs have the opportunity and are allowed to do what we call RFIs, request for information, which they go to the market and say, I wish to do this. I don't know exactly how. So before I publish something that is too broad, I want to hear from the experts. And that's your chance to go weigh in and say, okay, before you release, know that we have this new technology. Don't go with this old one, whatever it might be. So then you have a chance to weigh in. So please do that. But ultimately, if the MCA doesn't respond, just have us in mind. My contact information is on the last slide. And also there's an email on our website that you could also write to us directly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julio and Leah. Thank you for your intervention, and I'm sure the participants here today found it very helpful. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time we received a big amount of questions. So tomorrow you will receive the slides with contact information, and for people who had a very specific question, we might also reach out to you directly. As a reminder, also the webinar has been recorded. So if you want to go back, I will send you the link where you can see it. It will be made available on our webpage and YouTube channel within this week, so you can review it. You will also receive a survey that will pop up when you will exit the webinar. If you can complete it, it will be highly appreciated, so we can get your feedback on the webinar. So thank you again, Leah and Julio. It was a pleasure having you here today. And thanks to all the participants for joining us. And on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal, I wish you all a good day and hope to see you at our next events.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Bye.